Talk about practice. Practice. The Nuggets actually got to practice for once in the regular season. We'll get Adam's thoughts from practice. We'll talk about trade deadline expectations for Denver and why you should keep them low. Plus, interesting question: what does Denver actually need? Not want, not prefer, need from Jamal Murray. We'll talk about that today on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us your first listen. We appreciate you guys being with us Monday through Friday, being an everyday or checking us out daily. We appreciate you guys being part of our community. We are available on all platforms, including Apple Podcasts, where we do appreciate those 5-star reviews, and YouTube. You can check us out at youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets and catch a video version of the show. Best way to support the show is hit that subscribe button on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Adam Mares. He's from DMVR. Adam, you were at practice today. I couldn't make it because I'm swamped with trade deadline stuff. But for you, you said before the show that the most important thing to come out of it was the vibe. What's the vibe at practice?
It's nice being around the team. I mean, this is one of the things that there are these streaks in the middle of the season where you don't see them very much. And seeing and being around and talking to the guys really does give you a different perspective. It was easy. First of all, they got 4 days off, right, between Sunday's game and Thursday's game. So they looked rested. But also, everybody seems very relaxed. I asked Christian Brown about what it's like, going through the ups and downs of a season. And he's like, what ups and downs? Everything's been up. Which is funny because to us, we're like, there's been highs and lows to the season. But from their perspective, I think they just feel really in control. And Michael Malone said similar things. Just seems very, very content with the team that he has, where they're at. And there was a confidence coming from the Nuggets today that I don't want to say it was surprising, but it was very noteworthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is also the schedule lightening up in terms of they got through that they knew that stretch that we talked about was going to be really tough for them. We knew that was going to be a tough stretch of games, and they came out of it fine. And they're sitting tied for first in the Western Conference at 35-16. Everybody's healthy, knock on wood. They're in position, they're right where they need to be. And there may be things that they can tighten up. There are questions that we have, but I think even you and I are kind of like, you and I are not like they need, they got to make sure, at least I'm not. Are you in any sort of position of like, hey, well, I'm glad you're relaxed, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to get cleaned up. I feel like I feel like if the playoffs started tomorrow, in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month, the same would be true as long as they are in the same spot with health and where their game is at. I feel like they're ready to defend the title.
I definitely think that. I think the team thinks that. But there is one interesting dynamic, Matt, and it was brought up today. And that is that around this time last year, and especially right after the All-Star break, they had gained like a 6-game advantage right over Memphis. And Malone, unprovoked, kind of brought this up and said, I think last year the team saw that and got really bored. Everybody just started there was a boredom to the remaining portion of the season. And that's why they went to that dip. He said, this year, I just expect guys are going to be a lot more locked in because there is a doubt about who's going to be the top seed and what matchups will be what. So I think that's something to keep an eye on here over these next couple of weeks is, does Denver, I think we all expect them to have some kind of late season lull, but that might have been more a function of the standings than it was about their own sort of internal rhythm.
There's also a lull that involves still not losing to the Spurs, right?
Like last year, you're saying?
Yeah, last year wasn't necessarily a lull. It was it was very much that week before vacation where, yeah, you're in the office, but you're on your phone a lot. Right. That's how it felt. The Nuggets were on their phone for much of March. I don't think that they'll necessarily be there. They can kind of be a little bit maybe more selective with how they approach it, right? Okay, here's a game that we probably that isn't going to be that tough or that important. Maybe we can rest some guys, be a little bit more selective. The question, though, I think is interesting because of the race in the Western Conference where the gap, I will say this, the Nuggets can win the title with a 4 seed, but only 10 teams have made the finals in the last 20 years with a seed lower than third. And that counts both conferences. And no team has won the title with a seed lower than third. And that's not to say that if they get fourth rather than third, they can't win the title. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I do think that going on the road starting second round makes it a lot harder. It's all about like degree of difficulty, because last year was set up extremely well for them. They were they got the Wolves series done in 5, had a rest. Got through the Sun series in 6, had a rest. Got through the Lakers series, had a long rest before the finals. So these little things, it's not about can or cannot, it's about degree of difficulty for me in terms of where the standings are going to end up.
No question. And the other thing for me is really that second round matchup. I mean, if Denver's a 1-4, a 4-1, a 2-3, or a 3-2, that matchup to me is like, I would rather Denver be probably a 3 seed if it was the matchups that I thought were best for them than a 1 seed where maybe I thought the matchups were worse for them. In large part, just because I'm not buying both the Thunder and the Timberwolves making it to the, all the way. Like, I think one of them gets upset, So there's this level to me of like, I'm not wholly concerned with those teams. I do think the Clippers are tough. And I think the first round matchup, there are teams that are just easier than the others. So that's kind of how I look at it. But more than anything, and this was my broader point about being at practice today, the team doesn't seem to think that way. The team seems to think we're in a really good place. And the numbers bear this out and the record bears it out. But the games where they've looked bad that have really annoyed people like me, and I'm sure a lot of people fans watching and listening to the show, I just think the Nuggets feel more in control of those. So, you get blown out by the Knicks. You lose to the 76ers in Philadelphia. Those ones feel, frustrating, but I think they're like, oh yeah, we know what we did wrong and that we'll beat them when it matters. And that's just the vibe I get from the team.
Yeah. The losses have not felt discouraging this year at any point. And that's in part because they haven't had like a long losing streak. I'm trying to think, 3 in a row, may have had 3 at some point, but they do feel very confident. I do want to ask you this. So let's say that the choice the battle is between 3 and 4. What's the team of those top 3, Clippers, Thunder, Wolves, that you would prefer not to be in the bracket of?
Clippers. No, there's no question. I mean, again, I think that the Thunder, I still believe in a playoffs. Denver's going to match up very nicely with them. And I think that Minnesota, while they're a tough matchup, they're still inexperienced. And I just think that Denver is going to find baskets more than they're going to find baskets or find stops. So, but the Clippers are the team to me that you just don't want to allow them ahead in a series. I know that's a funny thing to say because Denver literally came back 3-1 against them. But I just feel like that's a team that has more outs and more experience. And that's why I think they're tougher.
Do you remember my preseason prediction?
Is it the Clippers? Are you going to double down on the prediction?
On the other side, we'll talk about the trade deadline and what that's going to mean for Denver, if they're going to do anything, why you should probably keep your expectations low. Plus, we'll talk about the buyout market as well, because I want to talk about that with Adam as well. We'll do that on the other side when we return on Locked On Nuggets. Right now, I want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. Trade deadline tomorrow. Make sure to check out the Locked On Podcast Network live show for the trade deadline. They do an NBA trade deadline show with host Josh Lloyd. Subscribe to Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube today so you don't miss Josh Lloyd breaking down every trade with analysis and insight you can only get from Locked On Fantasy Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so speaking of the trade deadline, the day to go, we had a small one today, two small ones today, as the Boston Celtics reinforced their front court with a very nice pickup, 2 second rounders for Xavier Tillman out of Memphis. That's a solid pickup for them. He can play next to Horford. He can play next to Porzingis. It means Horford doesn't have to play if KP's out. It's just like a very nice kind of boost for them. But with the Nuggets, Adam, I do think there's been talk, like the DeLon Wright stuff was kind of brought up. They'll canvas, they'll look at stuff, and I'm not saying it can't happen, but my expectations are very low. Stuff I get from around the league, I do not hear Denver as a target or an interested team on most of them. I think it's going to be a pitifully slow trade deadline in general. I just think everything's kind of frozen right now for a number of reasons. And on top of it, if you're Denver, you're not under any pressure financially. You're not under any pressure talent-wise. There's not a fit. There may be things that fans feel that they could be better at, but you have to manage some of that with how much that costs overall with the apron and how that limits them. So my view is that I'm not expecting any moves from Denver in advance of the trade deadline.
Yeah, I think that that's how I feel as well. And Michael Malone I don't remember previous trade deadlines. Maybe you can refresh my memory, but he really seems to be going out of his way to make it sound like he doesn't want one. He mentions we'll take phone calls, we'll do this or that. But this year, it just feels like he's been extra vocal about how much he likes his team going into the deadline. And, it's our job to answer the call, but we're not making any. So I don't know. I don't expect it either. But part of that is just because Malone, he is protesting quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I'll say this. I think he feels more comfortable. I think Malone feels the most comfortable with Reggie and DJ in the rotation of anybody. Right. I think.
Okay. So hold on that note though, because there is something interesting that happened today at practice where he was asked about the bench, and he mentioned, we have guys that we feel like we can trust in a playoffs. When you look at Peyton Watson and Reggie and Christian and what they've done, and then he had a pause and he goes, and then we got other guys that help us contribute like Zeke and DeAndre or something, and it was very clear to differentiate between those first three and the rest of the guys. While I agree that maybe he's more comfortable, I think that's more of a regular season thing. He's almost already hinting at what his playoff guys are.
I mean, they'll start, I think, every series like planning on AG staggering 5, or maybe the not in the first round, but second round on. I think the expectation is that that's going to have to be the way to go. And if they have to buy minutes, they'll try and buy minutes. But you would look for an upgrade over Reggie Jackson. You would look for an upgrade over DeAndre Jordan. I think if there was a sense of urgency that like we cannot go, like they cannot play spot minutes.
Yeah,
because that sounds crazy, but there are definitely guys in the league that coaches do not feel can play any spot minutes. Like there are guys that vanish entirely from the rotation, right? And I do think that if there was a situation where due to foul trouble or injury that Reggie Jackson and DeAndre Jordan need to anchor the second unit for 4 minutes, a half, I think that Malone probably feels better about that than most. Now, he may come out of that and still be like, nope, can't do it. We got to figure something else out. But I don't think necessarily that there's like that there's an urgency from that standpoint. I don't think the players feel like they are missing anything. I don't feel like they need something different. Like there's a real sense of they feel like the team's complete. And that's what you want to feel at this time of year. That's what you want your team to feel like. You don't want guys being like, man, we could really use another shooter, or the coach to be like, sometimes Malone's done this before in previous trade deadlines where he's like, we could really use another, like whatever it is. And it's good. I think that they don't feel that way. The front office will keep looking for options, but I just think that if you're a fan, you should have pretty low expectations of anything happening because this is a tough market to get into. And the Nuggets being the one to kind of add those, I think is a tough one, given what their asset package looks like.
I think that last part of it is the biggest piece of this, is they don't have a lot of moves to make. Just when you look at, you don't really want to give away future assets, I don't think, for a deadline deal, unless you're talking about a deadline deal that brings you years, this and next year. So when you start to say, okay, you need a player that fits a trade, just salary-wise, makes an impact, and then has something more than just like an expiring contract or this or that pool is just so small. So to me, some of this is that I think Denver's going to go through this every single year. They have a very expensive and very talented top 5. They seem to have a very good next 2-3 guys. And I think they're always going to have questionable 9 through 15. And it's just going to be how it always is. And they're not going to have a ton of assets. And we're always going to be at the trade deadline looking around going, you can move some of your end of bench guys for another team's end of bench guys?
Now, the buyout market, I think, is an interesting one because if you can add a guy without, you have to get rid of somebody because the roster's full. But if you could add a guy without necessarily changing up the makeup of the team, I think that's something that they'd probably be interested in. PJ Tucker, I think, is the obvious one. The Clippers really do not want him to wind up on Denver, from what I understand. There's a number of teams they don't want him to end up on, and that's one of them. I think the Sixers,
why. Probably maybe just insight, institutional knowledge.
I just think it makes him tougher, right?
It does, but he's not going to play in that series, would he?
It's just like another tough guy. I think if you're the Clippers and you're going for it, I don't think that I think that they are pretty comfortable now. I have heard that the Clippers are actually looking at an upgrade. I'll say that I heard some noise last night about them looking around a wing player that would be a pretty substantial upgrade for them. Actually, they have a surprisingly flexible roster given that they have the 4 guys that they do.
PJ Washington.
Yeah, it's PJ Washington.
Yeah, I've been seeing that one floating around too. It's like it is a little weird to think that they could add a guy like a PJ Washington since they have so many players already. And at the same time, he's a really good player, but there is something too, like too many guys. For sure. I don't know if you do it. Sure. PJ Tucker, look, I do think PJ Tucker wanting like a larger role and to be more part of a team is the thing that scares me because I wouldn't mind him. Like, look, PJ Tucker can come in and save Aaron Gordon in the regular season in that role. I mean, in the playoffs, you go to Aaron Gordon. Would PJ Tucker be happy with that? I don't know. And then I do think I believe in institutional knowledge. I believe in like you get a guy and then you go into a series where he played against the other team and he just has a little note like, hey, man, you know what Kawhi always used to complain about this? He hates it. Do that to him. There's those little ticks and tricks that know. And so I get why they would be afraid of it.
Gordon Hayward might be the other one. I think it's unlikely given that I think Indiana is going to offer him more than the men. They've got the ability to do so. And if Gordon Hayward gets bought out, which he may not, Charlotte's making a lot of noise about not wanting to do buyouts with Kyle Lowry and Gordon Hayward and the rest of them. But if Hayward were to come available, like that'd be like, that's a player that's like a different deal because like, I'll ask you this, like, who would you rather give minutes to in the playoffs, Gordon Hayward or Christian Brown?
I mean, to me, it's way more of a toss-up than it would be for you. In large part just because I think Denver doesn't need scoring in the playoffs. They're going to end up having Aaron Gordon and Murray on the court in those minutes, and that's your scoring. And you'll probably have Reggie too, and that's your third wheel of scoring off bench units. Every other line is going to have Jokic and KCP and all these other guys in it. So to me, I almost like when a team has more clarity of exactly who does what on a team, and so there's more of that with Christian.
That's interesting. I'm a little shocked because I'm like, oh yeah, no question, Gordon Hayward. Like Gordon Hayward's really good and versatile and does a lot and is a complete NBA player. But that's interesting.
And Christian Brown is an NBA champion and NCAA champion.
Mahalo says we cannot sign Hayward because of the new CBA. I don't know why that would be a case. Oh, because I guess if they're in the apron, I guess the question would be like if they made a move to get under the apron, they could.
I don't know. I don't know if they can bring him in. It would be an interesting guy, though. I do think because I think he's on the last year of his deal, right? Yeah. He could be an interesting Denver's only signed, like Justin Holiday and guys that were like 1 year, not really come to play. But he would be an interesting one where he's somewhere in between. Maybe he's more of a Jeff Green, and I could see Denver adding him next year in that caliber of a role where it's like a limited role, but might actually be a consistent role.
So Mahal actually brings up a good point. I don't think they will. Again, I don't think they will. But should Denver look to try and move somebody to get under the apron so that they can add guys in the buyout? Is it important enough?
I thought they were already available too. This is obviously know this is my weak suit here. I thought they were already a team that could add somebody should they open up a roster spot. So we'll see. I just don't think. I think Denver's playoff road top 8 is set, and everything else is just like to survive.
We'll revisit the rotation the next time they don't win the title. I think it's like the way that we may be looking at this. Up next, I wanted to ask. I was thinking about stuff to ask Adam, and I do want to have this conversation. I want to know what Adam thinks of this question. What do the Nuggets need from Jamal Murray? We'll talk about that on the other side on Locked On Nuggets. Let's talk about Prize Picks. It's demon time. That's right, demon time on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000. Demon and Goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can also play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz in the community tab. It's really simple to play on Prize Picks. You make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. You're just choosing if a player will have more or less of the stats, and that's all you really need. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We're also brought to you today by Game Time. So I'm wearing a Dave Matthews Band t-shirt because I'm that kind of white dude. And he's coming this summer. And guess what? I'm looking for tickets. Prize Picks. Not Prize Picks. Game Time. Prize Picks can't. I'm going to get the money to buy the tickets from Prize Picks, and I'm going to use Game Time to get those tickets because Game Time has this awesome ability. You see where the seats are, so you know that your view is going to be good. There's so many great concerts coming to Denver in the summer. I know this is midwinter and it's tough. You can buy yourself something nice to look forward to when the weather is nicer. Look at all those great events that there's going to be on the Game Time app. They've got deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making this part of your day. All right, Adam Mares. So I want to ask you this question because I think it's a great one. Jamal Murray's not going to be an all-star. He's totally okay with that decision. Talked about it the other day that there's lots of great players that aren't all-stars this year. I am curious about this, though. The Nuggets won a title with Jamal Murray as their second best player. He was phenomenal, had a 30-point triple-double in the finals alongside Nikola, averaged 50, 40, 90 on 30 points a game in the Western Conference Finals, had some huge moments round by round of the NBA playoffs. My question for you, do the Nuggets need more than just that from Jamal Murray? Do they need more from him in the regular season? Or do they need to be able to know that they can count on that? What do they need from Jamal Murray in your mind?
I mean, the answer, like if you were just looking for the bare minimalist answer, what do they need from him? They need him to be great in the playoffs. They need him to beat the defensive players that they're going to throw at him in a way where he looks like a all-star that he doesn't look like in the regular season. So that begs the question of, okay, well, we're in the regular season, so what do they need now? And I think the honest answer is, to get a 1 seed, it would be made easier by him probably being just a little bit more consistent and more dominant at his role and in the two-man game in the regular season. It probably would make things a little bit easier. But the truth is that they can get to the playoffs, as we know, as a top seed with him being a 21 point per game scorer. And in the playoffs, they're going to need to kind of ratchet that up. I will say that there is something to Murray last year. I am concerned. I brought this up a few times now, but they need it from game number 1 and they need it from round number 1 every single game. And I do think Jamal has typically started even in the playoffs a little bit slow and gotten better as they've gone on. And so I'm curious to see this year, does he have the conditioning? Does he have all that stuff to kind of hit the ground right away? Because the first round matchup this year might not, but may be significantly harder than it was last year.
So you're okay if he continues to be this type of player in the regular season as long as he is the guy that he's been in the playoffs from game 1?
I think that's the key is from game 1. The from game 1 part is the big thing here, because last year you get a Timberwolves team that was missing 2 of their top 6 guys. And look, they won in 5, But I just saying this year you might get a team that's a little bit tougher. By the way, do you see the news?
Yeah, I was gonna hit it. So some breaking news while we're on the show here live. Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN reports the Minnesota Timberwolves are closing in on a deal for Monte Morris. They were looking at Tyus Jones, couldn't get that deal done, but they have Tim Connelly gets back his guy Monte, saves Monte from the pit of despair that is the Detroit Pistons, that shores up the second unit for the Wolves. They were looking for a backup point guard. This gives them some options short and long term with Mike Conley, get the rest him a little bit more. Jordan McLaughlin, I think, has done a fine job, but Monte's obviously an addition. That's a really good add for the Minnesota Timberwolves, who just get a little bit better and add a little bit more institutional knowledge in the form of Monte.
They needed a backup point guard. I thought it was going to be Bones, which somehow would have been like tougher for me in a weird way. They get Monte. Look, man, Monte obviously not playing a whole lot this year, and even just looking at him, he looks a little heavier. So I wonder how much the injury and stuff has he's not the guy we're thinking of, that he's been in years past. But at the same time, I love Monte, and I hate that Tim Connelly did it. He's Mr. Nugget, man. You can't have a Mr. Nugget in Minnesota, but here we are. It seems like a good move. It's totally unsurprising. This is such a Tim Connelly move.
Yeah. We'll probably talk more about this on tomorrow's show. I'll have more reaction to this later. I'll be with you guys again tonight, by the way, for a live show. All right, so let's go back to the Jamal Murray conversation. So I think it's interesting just from the perspective of whether or not you need more from Jamal in the regular season. And that's not to say that he's having a bad season, right? I think it's too far to say he's having a bad season. I think he's having a good season. It's just a matter of he still has never really he's never been that guy in the regular season. And for whatever reason, he is a dude that turns it on. And the question, I do think an interesting question is right now, I don't think that they do. An interesting question is whether eventually they will need more from Jamal in the regular season.
I do think eventually they will. Yeah.
Yeah. From the standpoint of how much Jokic has weathered over since basically the bubble. Yeah. He's played a ton of basketball. Just a ton of high usage basketball, and being able to take some of that burden off, I think, is important in the long term.
Yeah.
I also think it's kind of interesting from the perspective of this gets into the idea of, can you count on guys in the playoffs, right? Because I've seen a lot of really good players have bad series.
Yeah.
I've seen Kawhi Leonard have bad series, as much as he's talked about as one of the most clutch guys. Even in early rounds, I've seen him struggle.
I think he's fairly considered a clutch playoff performer, though. Just because he's had bad ones doesn't mean.
Yeah, he's had a lot of really big moments. I do think his Game 7 stuff is a little overstated. He's got some bad moments in Game 7s, but that's fine. I think there are other guys I think that have that reputation. And so it is kind of one of those things where it's fine until it's not. That's kind of the thing I think with Jamal is it's totally okay for him to be the player that he has been, as long as it doesn't interfere with anything. But if they were to lose in the playoffs and he were to struggle, now all of a sudden this is what's tough though, is think about how amazing he was in the bubble and how amazing he was last year.
But man,
I think he would still face a lot of scrutiny.
Think about this. If the Nuggets were to lose, just say they were to lose in our first round series. So you win a title and then you lose in a first round with Murray playing exactly as he's playing right now. That would make a tough offseason analysis, because you'd be right now it's he's always there when it counts and blah, 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 blah. But if you get into that spot moment, you're well, I don't know. How do we contextualize this? You get burned one time and all of a sudden your trust goes. So I do think that is one weird part about it. But here's my real question I want to ask you. I think we have in our heads this idea that you become great in the offseason, right? You work out, you take a step up, and then the season happens and you kind of just are the player that you are. Then an offseason comes and you get better, and you go. I think that you get better during the season. The season is longer than the offseason. And I wonder if there's this level of when he is sort of in the level of play that he typically performs at in the first half of regular seasons, are you almost punting on the opportunity to get better? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I do wonder if there was something too where the Nuggets were just in a zone all the way from the start, and you're oh, this is opening up opportunities for new wrinkles. I don't know. It'd be an interesting question to ask a coach or something off record in an off season.
Yeah. So I think that's
Where do you
would
have an
agree.
opinion on that? Like if Murray was playoff form in October and they
Right.
just were like grinding, would the team be like learning something from that, like elevating, or would it just be kind of those games don't mean anything and they're already at the top of where they can get to?
I think it's one of those things where it raises your margin for error, right? So
Yeah.
your win percentage goes up just from the standard of like your floor, you can play at your not even floor, but just like a normal pace. But then Jamal's performance tips you over and gives you an extra 5% winning chance every game. And then that adds up over the course of the 15 games that you play in. So you go from, hey, we went, 9-7, or we went from 10-5 to 12-3.
Right.
And it's like those little edges that get you through there. Because you see this a lot actually, where teams will actually have dips, but it's like this guy was just bonkers for a month, just insane, and that's pretty normal. I think actually, to be quite honest with you, I think the Bucks were like this for much of December, where it was like they weren't playing well, but Giannis was just insane in December and January, and that was enough to carry them. And
I see this from Trippy Collector. There's no chance it would outweigh the exhaustion effect. Look, Michael Jordan's team, he played all the time. He played 82 games almost every year. Kobe Bryant, Kareem. Like, I just look at this and I think that it's amazing to me how much that thought process, and I'm not even trying to say it's right or wrong. I do find it annoying, though, that we've accepted it, because it's like we've accepted this lesser version of a product we consume. So that part bothers me. But this idea of like, we just say, oh, yeah, you need to not try or limit how hard you try, when that never was the case. Guys used to try all the time. I think it limits your end of your career. I actually think there might be something too. Kobe maybe could have done what LeBron did and extended his career a handful of years, but I don't know that it, for young, especially 27-year-old super athletes, I don't know that it like meaningfully lowers your ability to perform in the playoffs. Those guys played 82 and they were pretty good. And if I recall, they were pretty good in the playoffs.
I don't know what to make of all of the exhaustion numbers, because there's like indications the game is so much more harder now, and basketball specialization, like it's all too layered. I'm just kind of like, I have no idea. Like I don't know. Like I think we kind of take like what we see in front of us and we got to live with how it is, and that's all I can really kind of get to.
Kobe played 80 games at 38 minutes per game in 2002. Like, first of all, 38 minutes is an enormous amount, and then to play in all 82, and then guess what? Went to the playoffs and took his game up a whole other level and played the best basketball of his career to that point.
I also I do want to be very, very clear with Jamal, because it's like the way we talk about him is because of the nights where it's like 15, 6, 4, but like his season averages, he's averaging 21 and 7, 6.6. Like
I actually think he's been really good more often than not lately.
Yeah, so. Like he's averaging 21 and 6.6 on 47, 41, 85 splits. That's a great, with a 20 PR. Like that's a great player. It's more a matter of I am interested in whether I basically am interested in, do the Nuggets at any point need him in the regular season to play like an all-star? And I guess like an interesting one is, what if there's a situation where he plays more like an all-star in the regular season, but less of like a god in the playoffs? What does that mean for him? We don't have an experience with human Jamal in the playoffs.
I'm just looking it up. I know it's a different era, Matt. I know everything's different. Michael Jordan, 1998, his last season with the Bulls, 82 games, 39 minutes a game. Did not miss a game and played 39 minutes. And then, of course, went into the playoffs and did what he did. So I just think some of this stuff contextually to me is a little funny, but that's where we are these days. Then in the playoffs, by the way, every year of his life, every series of his life, he played over 40 minutes in the playoffs. So
it's crazy. Yeah, some of the minutes that Jordan logged, especially in from 89 to 92, whoo! Like it was wild how much he was playing. It's one of the reasons why everyone's like, you can't play Jokic this much, and I'm just like, can you?
I know.
Can't you? You can. All right, it's gonna do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. I'll be back with you on a Wednesday night for Thursday morning, doing a live show on a number of topics, getting you set for the trade deadline in the last couple of hours. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll talk to you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.